Hi everyone. Today we're going to look at how to write a contention or thesis statement. So essentially they are the same thing. And what they do is they serve as the foundation of your argument or your speech or what you're writing about. Essentially, they are the basis in which you build what you write. So it offers your point of view or your perspective. Okay, it is usually only 1 to 2 sentences long, and it's a statement of what you believe. So it forms the foundation of your argument. So in this case, with your literary essay, your contention or your thesis statement, they're the same thing, is essentially what you believe regarding the concept. Okay, so remembering that our concepts for 2025 this year, and they may change in the future, but regardless, I'm going to work with those concepts for today. The concepts are courage, injustice, or inequality. So essentially, your thesis statement or your contention is around what you think about that concept. So, before you begin writing your contention, you really have to decide what it is that you want to write in your essay or in your article. You should have a really clear understanding of the question or the topic that you want to address and what you want to write about before you write your contention. You'll find it's really difficult to write a contention if you actually don't know what you want to talk about in your essay. So consider the following questions before you actually start writing a contention and work through these steps before you actually formulate it. So think about, what is courage? What is injustice? What is inequality? Brainstorm and write what those things are. So, for example, injustice is when there is unfairness in society or in a legal system that disadvantages one over another person. Courage is having the ability to stand up for what you believe in despite the challenges or the odds facing you. So, those are the things that I would be brainstorming or writing down um, in in this area before I even start writing my contention. So underneath this, I would be actually typing or handwriting what I think the concept is. I'd also be thinking about, well, how is it shown in the text that I'm studying? So in this case, it's how is it shown in the novel, and then how is it shown in the film? And then also, really importantly, how is it relevant today? So, why does it still matter? Because essentially, we're looking at the relevance to contemporary audiences. What can we learn from the text? Why do we still care? And you need to answer and consider that throughout your whole essay. So, before you're starting to write your contention, you're asking yourselves these things. You're brainstorming ideas, writing down any thoughts, any observations, any ideas you have relating to your chosen concept. So, for example, if you're doing inequality, well, you're like, well, yeah, inequality relates to prejudice. It relates to sexism, racism, classism. Inequality does not just have to do with racism, right? It's about one group having more than another. So, what is it that I can think about? So I would be sitting there and brainstorming any ideas or any thoughts that pop up with the concept. You could even draw yourself a mind map with the word in the middle and then just write anything that you think about that comes up with that concept. So I said that inequality relates to prejudice, sexism, racism, and classism. In the instance of wanting to use it in the film Just Mercy and To Kill a Mockingbird, I probably focus more on prejudice and racism because that is relevant in both of those texts. But depending on what film you're doing, could be different as well. So I'm also saying that, some of my ideas around inequality is, well, that it is a negative thing, that it's used to oppress other people, that it's used to advantage others. So in one respect, if you are causing something to be unequal, then you're advantaging one group over the other. You could also discuss how inequality causes people to be privileged or not privileged, or it causes them to experience hardships and challenges because of it. You could say that inequality influences the way that people behave towards each other or the way that society accepts certain behaviors. So, this is all, again, just still part of your brainstorming. So, you're actually not anywhere near writing a contention yet. You're just formulating your ideas and trying to think about what is it that I'm going to talk about in my essay. So on step 3 now, narrowing down your focus. So what is your perspective or your opinion on the topic or the task or the question? So in year 11, you're looking at how is the concept represented in the text. Represented just means how are they shown? Are they shown positively? Are they shown negatively? Are they shown as a force of good, a force of evil? Do they motivate characters? What is it that they actually do? So, what do you want to argue? What do you want to prove? What is it that you think about the concept? And I want you to write it down. So, for example, you could say that injustice is represented as a negative thing, particularly in terms of the courtroom. You could say that injustice is shown in the film through racial injustice or unequal access to legal representation, or that it's shown through racial bias or systemic barriers in the community. It's up to you, really, what you think it is and how it's represented or shown. Um, Obviously, thinking about the relevance today, well, all of these things still exist today. Okay, so injustice and inequality exists today. People being courageous still exists today. And, these are the things that we need to link back to why they still matter. So, the next thing that you should do after you've narrowed down your focus, figured out what your perspective or your opinion is to write a working contention. Now, this is going to be rough. It'll be just a really rough 1 to 2 sentences of you trying to come up with your argument or your point of view in a summary. So, it can be a simple sentence or two, but it's a start, right? It's your starter contention. You might want to help yourself by considering what the keywords are in the question or what you should be talking about. So, for example, if you're doing injustice, you might think of keywords like unfair or racial bias or disadvantage or other concepts that come up when you think of injustice, right? So try to put those in there. If the essay question is asking you to discuss a representation, then you should be using words like representation or demonstrates or is depicted as or is revealed to audiences, those types of things, because it's how something is shown. So any of those sort of keywords that discuss how something is shown, that's what you need to be doing. So write your working contention, use some words from the question, use obviously the word that is your concept. If that's not in a working contention, you definitely need to put it in there. So the first one you write is going to be rough, and you're probably going to write it 2, 3, 4 times until you refine it, which is step 5, to what you actually want it to be. What you need to do is review it to make sure it's clear, that it's concise, and that it's focused. Okay, don't waffle. So essentially, your content should tell me what your concept is, how it's shown in the text, and why it still matters. Okay, write it, read over it, consider whether it reflects what you're actually trying to say, or if it's just a confused jumble of gobbledygook. And if that is the actual mess it comes out as, do it again. Keep going until you get something that is clear, concise, specific, and focused. Okay, so all of your arguments, everything that you talk about in your essay has to fit within your contention. If it doesn't link back to your contention, it does not belong in your essay. Okay, so see the golden triangle here, we've got the contention at the top. Okay, whoops, I'm moving it around. Then you've got your topic sentences, and it's basically a triangle or a visual to show you that they are connected and that everything inside, right? Everything inside of the triangle needs to be related to the contention and the topic sentences. They've got to be connected. Okay, I should be able to read your contention and then read your topic sentences and highlight and make very clear links between them. All right, so once you've made your contention strong, concise, and effective, Obviously, triple check that it addresses your argument, doesn't have any vague or unnecessary ideas, no unnecessary words or overcomplicated phrases, and get rid of the waffle. Once you've got a contention and you're happy with that, that's when you start to write your topic sentences. And they should, like I said, be directly linked to the contention. So have your contention there and then write your two topic sentences before you do any other planning. Okay. And that's a really great way to make sure that they match each other and that they strongly link. So I want to show you an example. And you're not allowed to copy, right? This is not for you to copy, but this is an example contention. And I did this one based on injustice. And I didn't write it first up and it was done, right? That's not how this works. I wrote it a few times and I refined it and I went back to it. And I'm the head of English, right? So it should take you longer to do it than it took me. And it took me probably about 20 minutes to write a contention I was happy with, including two topic sentences. For you, you might spend longer on that, or you might spend more little sessions going back over it to strengthen it. Essentially, your contention and your topic sentences need to be really strong because they form the basis of what you're actually going to say and they keep you on task, keep you on topic, and you don't deviate from there. Okay, that they really help you nail your structure. Right, so my contention exemplar, and it says, do not copy this. I have written about the justice system because I found some connections in our novel, To Kill a Mockingbird, and our film, Just Mercy, which is also set mainly in a courtroom. So, my contention, both To Kill a Mockingbird and Just Mercy powerfully illustrate injustice by contrasting those who uphold systemic racism and those who challenge it. These texts encourage contemporary audiences to recognize ongoing inequities and advocate for a more just society. Now, reading that contention, I should understand, or my reader should understand, that I'm going to talk about injustice, which is the concept. I'm going to talk about it in relation to two different texts, so To Kill a Mockingbird and Just Mercy, and I have them in italics because they're titles. And I'm going to talk about how that injustice is contrasted, okay? And it's contrasted by characters who uphold it and perpetuate racism and injustice, so they're the ones that cause it, and characters who challenge it and stand up against it. Okay, so I've decided to attack it in that respect by doing a character-based essay. Okay, so and then I also have made a link in a separate sentence about why it still matters today. Okay, and obviously it still matters today because it's still an issue in our current society, which is why I've written that there. So I decided that I think the characters that it would be easiest for me to write about would be Bob Ewell from To Kill a Mockingbird and Sheriff Tate from Just Mercy, and how those characters actually manipulate the legal system. Okay, and it's them who basically allow the systemic racism to essentially wrongfully convict two African American men. So I wanted to focus on how it's their exploitation and manipulation of the current social and systemic structures of the legal system that allows them to get away with basically what they do. They rely on the fact that they are two white men in a community that values whiteness over being African American, and they exploit that. They take advantage of that, and consequently, people are falsely convicted or wrongfully convicted. So I wanted to put that all into one sentence, and this is essentially what I came up with. So I said, both Bob Ewell and Sheriff Tate manipulate the legal system's racial bias by relying on false testimony to wrongfully convict Tom Robinson and Walter McMillan. Now, both of the characters actually do that. They rely on false testimony. So Bob Ewell is someone who creates false testimony, whereas Sheriff Tate, he basically gathers false testimony and ignores evidence to the contrary. So he is very well aware that the evidence he's using to try to convict Walter McMillan is false, whereas Bob Ewell is very well aware as well because he's the one who actually makes up the false testimony. So within the bulk of that body paragraph, that's what I'm going to be talking about, how both of those characters take advantage of their whiteness and the racial bias and discrimination, prejudice and hatred in their communities, and how they exploit the all-white juries that are on the jury, or the men on the jury, to get a conviction for both these very innocent men. So that would be the content of my body paragraphs, talking about those two characters. And that fits because it's manipulating the legal system's racial bias, and that's in my contention here because it's talking about those who uphold systemic racism, which is Bob Ewell and Sheriff Tate. As you can see in my contention, I don't actually name any characters, and I don't need to, right? I do that when I get to my topic sentences. So that there clearly tells me what the content of the body is going to be. Whereas the contention is a little bit more broad, the topic sentences are much more narrowed in. Right. Now, obviously, I want to talk about contrasting characters. So, two characters that are people who challenge the systemic racism and challenge the injustice that happens in the society. And for me, it was very obvious that it's the two lawyers. We've got Atticus Finch and Brian Stevenson. So, very short, sharp topic sentence here. Atticus Finch and Brian Stevenson both challenge systemic racism by fighting for justice within the legal system. And that's where I would talk about how those characters both try to challenge the racism, not only in their town, but specifically in the courtroom. And there are some great quotes in there from Atticus in his closing statement, some great quotes in there from what he says to Atticus, and also with Brian in his opening statement toward the end, where he's trying to essentially get the charges dismissed. So some brilliant quotes in there about the fairness of the legal system and the fact that racial prejudice has sort of infiltrated that legal system and the justice system, and how that's not right. So they sort of shed light onto who has power and who doesn't, and the privileged and the disadvantaged. So that would be what the content of that body paragraph would be about. So you can see that my essay is about contrasting characters relating to injustice and their role within injustice in both of the texts. So it's a pretty complex sort of meaty topic, I guess. So obviously, the content of both of my body paragraphs are going to relate to the topic sentences for each paragraph. So I chose to do the example on the justice system, or in injustice specifically, because that is where I saw connections. But if you're doing other films like The Help, or you're doing High Ground, or something else that your teacher has given you, obviously, if there is no legal system or justice system in there, then you can't do that topic. But you will find other connections. You might find that it works for you to do a essay on characters that perpetuate prejudice and racism or sexism versus characters that are ones who fight against it. Or you might like to look at characters who are courageous versus characters who are cowards. Or you don't even have to set it up that way, like one versus the other. You could literally just do your whole essay on how prejudice is evident in both of the texts, or how courage is evident in both of the texts. And you don't even have to do it with a character focus. Obviously, you're going to talk about the characters, but you might like to do it on a themes focus, linking to those broader concepts. There are plenty of ways that you can go about this. Just wanted to show you one way that made the most sense for me. So I hope that helps you today, and that you can confidently try to write more specific, clear, and concise contentions that ultimately reflect what it is that you think, what you believe about the concept, and how it's represented in both the texts. Okay, thanks.